Hello and welcome to BAFTA and the David Lean Lecture by Danish director Lone Scherfig. The David Lean Lecture carries on the legacy of the great director David Lean and aims to provide an insight into the experiences and creative achievements of leading filmmakers. This is the first time a female director has delivered the lecture. She began her career directing award-winning commercials and television dramas in her native Denmark. In 2000, Scherfig wrote and directed Denmark's fifth official Dogma film, Italian for Beginners, bringing her to the attention of the worldwide film industry, critics and audiences. At the 2001 Berlin International Film Festival, the film won the Silver Bear Jury Prize for Best Director. Scherfig's first English-language film was Wilbur Wants to Kill Himself in 2002 and has been followed by a string of successful British-funded films. In 2010, she directed An Education, which gained BAFTA nominations for Best Director, an Outstanding British Film, and a BAFTA for Lead Actress Carey Mulligan, as well as Oscar nominations in the Picture, Lead Actress and Writing categories. In 2011, Scherfig directed One Day, based on David Nicholls' best-selling novel and starring Anne Hathaway. Her most recent feature film, The Riot Club, adapted from the play Posh, premiered at this year's Toronto Film Festival. Scherfig is currently directing Astronaut Wives Club, a 10-episode drama series for ABC Studios, which tells the story of the women behind some of the biggest events in American history. Finding the light in darker subjects has long been Lone Scherfig's forte. Characterful, thought-provoking and never less than entertaining. It's what Lone Scherfig's work always has been, and no doubt always will.
Generosity is what drives me. It's also greed, selfishness, curiosity. But the big excuse to myself for doing what I do is that I do it to give something to somebody or share something with someone. And I feel that David Lean's films had some of the same. The films are not pointing at themselves. All the cinematic devices he invented, the cinematic vocabulary came from the joy of expanding the language, of showing something to someone, of searching for the cinematic words that would enable him to give somebody something. Varikino was probably the most important thing he gave me. Varikino is Dr. Zhivago's dacha, the summer house. It was Boris Pasternak, the writer, had one, and David Lean made a much more generous version of it. This is something I want to do on a much, much smaller scale. I'm always afraid to be pretentious or be pompous or immodest. Stinginess, the opposite, is on film as unforgivable as I think it is when people have that character in real life. I do like minimalism, and I can't remember a moment or a scene where I've gotten rid of things, a line, a pause, an irrelevant prop, and regretted it later. I really like simplicity, precision. I try with film what Coco Chanel said, that before you leave your house, you should take one thing away. That works with sound, it works with acting, it works with, maybe not so much with costume, because the designers are very good here, but precision is better than grandeur on most films. Ida is the most prominent example, but that film too is generous. It's because it trusts the audience to understand the very complex questions it poses. And it wants to share these stunning, very extravagant images. It's just the world it portrays that is Puritan, but the film itself, too, is an act of love. Like David Lean or Hitchcock, Pawlikowski trusts the audience. He even trusts to sometimes not give them the most important moments or the most horrific moments. Film is not just about creating characters that the audience can identify with, but more importantly, to create a film that makes the audience feel understood, that you don't see the film, you feel seen by it. Italian for Beginners, that was the international breakthrough I did, but probably most importantly, the film that got me to meet with Jenny Casarotto and Jody Shields, which then again gave me some possibilities here. People felt the film was about them. It might have had to do with the fact that the film did not have any score, the feelings were not controlled in any way, but it also had the trust of the audience, the attempt to get to know them, the curiosity for fellow characters. It is so bleak, that film. It's shot in a windy November suburb. 3 or 4 people die within the first 20 minutes. The humor is very, very understated. But still, whether I was in Motovun, Croatia, or in Moscow, or in Madison, Wisconsin, people somehow felt it was theirs. It had a life that I had nothing to do with, and the joy of giving was immense. I didn't know the depth of that word, education, when we shot in Italian for Beginners about Lynn Barber's year where she turned 17 and got educated. But now, after a year's almost daily dinners with the Riot Club, I understand how education and access to it defines your society to a degree that's almost chilling. But I've also sensed how important a strong educational background, the type you can get here and nowhere else, how people who have that education and make decisions of power in your film community use it to ensure films of this caliber and to protect the British film tradition, and I'm impressed with particularly Tessa Ross and Christine Langan and the role they had played in my work over the past few years, their integrity, their wisdom and their style. My own education was free. I went to Sorbonne when I was Jenny Miller's age. I studied in Paris just like she wanted to. I did smoke. I saw a lot of films. I didn't wear black like she said she wanted to. There was no existentialism, but a lot of watching films. When we shot on our last shooting day of an education, we shot in Paris. I took a prop bicycle and drove from one location to the next, feeling that I had come a long way. And even meeting Peter Sarsgaard, who was a phenomenal actor, of course, as well as Carey Mulligan, was a very happy, glorious moment. And we were beginning to sense that that film had some of the qualities, too, that Italian for Beginners had, that people thought it was theirs. I went to university. This is the late 70s, very politicized years. We discussed why, seriously, and how we could abolish television, and how we studied the films of workers in Latin America. I made a big feminist thesis about pornography, and we were way left-wing. One student was different. This was Lars Trier, dressed in, at that time he thought he was Jewish, but he would still dress in a Nazi-inspired outfit where everyone else had long hair, and he made films that were really talented, all handmade, mechanic, full of new ideas. I wrote a thesis about neorealism, and those films, the Italian films from the 50s and 40s, the films that were political and intimate at the same time, that were generous and grand, but simple, modest, are still the films I feel more related to than any Scandinavian films. I love them like I love people almost. Lars von Trier, I met again in film school when I got in a year later, and his films got more and more spectacular. The school was very small then. We were 6 students in each generation, and we got to know each other very well, and we got to love our school very, very much. We were frustrated. The teachers were frustrated. They couldn't understand why the rest of us could not just be as original and inventive and eccentric as Lars. We all tried. We were helpless. It was hopelessly pretentious, and we were all perfectionists. When I went to film school, I remember thinking that as we had one TV channel in Denmark then, if something I had done was on television, Margaret Thatcher wouldn't be on television. So that was the way I felt I had the right to do that. The first year, we couldn't use dialogue at all. We had to learn to tell pictures in images, not to use a shot more than once. And for someone like me, who much later found a tone that is about nothing like that, it was frustrating, it was too hard, but I still used that craft I learned then all the time. But I started writing. I made an alter ego, Else Claes Mogensen, who had a very troublesome life with many, many happy endings. And I would send the short stories to magazines that were about people sharing their life stories. And when I got the paychecks, I had to write back under the name of Else that would they please change the name on the check to Lone Scherfig, because she really wanted to give the money to that girl. I still write. I've just written a script that Pernille August is to direct. I do love writing. I find it much too lonesome compared to filmmaking. I also find that, especially in this country, there are writers that are much better than I am. We were proud to come from a country that had the least difference between the richest and the poorest. It didn't give us much to make films about. So the films were inspired by the favorite teachers, the big European auteurs. We would watch Kurosawa, Tarkovsky, Vaida, Buñuel, Bergman, and we had phenomenal guest teachers. Jean-Claude Carrière, Roman Polanski, Jan Troell, Walter Murch were people who would come to our school and teach us how to make films. And this is what our dyslectic cinematic language was inspired by. Very little about America. The longer the tracking, the better the students. And there were so many things you could not do. Never cut the feet off the characters. Never use the same shot more than once, which is very tricky when you do cross-cutting, two people talking to one another, and you want to see both of them at the same time, or look at them whenever relevant, which is one of the finest tools in the cinematic toolbox. No, there must be other ways to communicate it. A little later, when I started teaching at the film school, there was a much more US-oriented film history teacher who we adored, and he would start every season by showing the scene from Singing in the Rain. It's one long, really complicated shot, singing, dancing, and finally turning the sofa over, and they sit down on it, and the song is over, and Debbie Reynolds adjusts her skirt. And that moment of adjusting the skirt, the teacher would go, "Look at it. This is where it becomes human. This is what you should go for. Not the song, not the sofa, not the music, not the singing in the rain, but that little moment where she does that to her skirt." And that is what I like to do, and that is what I found through Dogma. My love for imperfection, for things that are al fresco, for things that only happen once, could not really find a place. Because if it was the least bit out of control, we would just throw it out. You'd rather deliver a film that had tons of moments with scene missing than a film that had flaws. We would hear stories about how Ingmar Bergman would shoot that the set would be so quiet you could hear the actors breathe. And I did not thrive with that. I did thrive hiding behind the camera, but I would always go to the actors first, and I always felt that after a shot you should almost be in the middle of the shot, talking straight away, or at least making sure that they were not left alone on set with the whole crew talking and communicating quietly behind a camera. And I felt that directing is an intimate process, almost embarrassing process. I'm almost too shy to direct, and I really prefer to do it in a noisy room where no one hears what's going on. But this solid background in analog, classic film craft is invaluable. It gets me through the days, even if I don't really use it. And that is what makes me dream of Varikino. Varikino as a better place for filmmakers. A place of trust, trust in each other, in the script, in the cast, and in the film process, and in the audience. A place where you think it is absolutely all right to spend 5 minutes saying, let's go to Varikino, and it actually takes almost 5 minutes before they open the drawer and you see that this is where Zhivago is going to write a novel by Boris Pasternak. Any director can jump straight at that table. Any director can, and you have to convince yourself, I don't need the frozen room. I don't need icicles hanging from the chandeliers. The table itself is a snow landscape. It's about the table, it's about the drawer, it's about the look in Zhivago's eyes. I'm fine without Varikino. You may think that you, unlike other European countries, don't have the advantage of a home market speaking a language that you don't share with the Americans. But in Europe, not that you are not Europe, we are not in doubt about which films are British and which are American. And that is because of your traditions, your values, your tone, your cinematic history that comes back and back with every generation, and your education. Dogma was very, very helpful. We shook off our film school perfectionism. We found a language where we moved towards the story and where we got rid of everything excess. We only did one each. Mine was the 5th, and I wasn't part of making those first 10 rules. I might have changed them a little bit if I had asked. But I really wanted to obey them, and they were incredibly helpful. You got to know how coincidence will help you, how the weather is there to help you and not to be your obstacle, how the smallest things, the smallest obstacles should not destroy a scene for you, but that you have to turn them around and turn them into blessings and make them work for the scene. You get better at removing things because you could not bring in anything. There were no makeup, the tears had to be real, no music, the emotion had to come from the scene. No added sound, the actor, everything had to be recorded on the spot. No weapons, no genre, and you also signed a piece of paper saying, I'm not going to be credited, I'm no longer an artist, I will no longer make aesthetic decisions. And it was such a relief. You have, and some of the films do have quite a visual statement and style, not just because they are handheld and look very bad, but also because randomizing does give you something you wouldn't have had otherwise. The films were very personal. Celebration, Festen, is a lot like Thomas Vinterberg himself, getting up at a very formal family event and saying something nobody wants to hear. He got the same reaction from distributors. You cannot make a film about a victim of incest, have someone in the lead just standing there saying things that are horrifying. Do not go there. But no one controlled us, no one read our drafts. We just got a budget and some shooting days, and the films became about who we were. Italian for Beginners was a film about solitude, a film about breaking your curve from an unhappy life to one that is much happier, and that is what happened to me because of that film. The Riot film was a film about class, and for me, each of the films have a theme that is the thing I keep coming back to whenever I need an answer to any question, basically. Working with actors can be an extraordinary process, and shooting the Riot Club in particular has been, because of the cast, a unique experience. And I can hardly think of any actor over the years I've worked with that I would not love to work with again and expand our language and find out where are we now, what can we give each other now. But the discipline, the work discipline here, where actors have such high standards, where it's craft and where you can find things outside of you and don't necessarily have to find everything within you, where you walk onto set and know your words well enough to be able to change things, sing, dance, improvise, listen to one another, keep your mind open for things that might turn up when reality kicks in or you get a Dogma moment, is a fantastic process. When I began shooting in the UK, I found a mindset that is impressive. The work ethics here are sky high. You have the combination of doing films that are very big, so you get the biggest toolbox out, and you have the ability to take the experiences from the small kitchen sink film, the intimacy, the detail, the little cracks in the voices, and bring it into the biggest film. The irony, the humor, the attention to detail. And you also have the ability to take the experiences from the large format and bring it into a small scene in a kitchen or a bedroom or a car. That really is special, that people are able to cross over and know when the budget is big and they can get space, and when the budget is small, so they need to work at a different level. It is the collaborative elements of filmmaking that I like the most. And if I sat down at Dr. Zhivago's desk and were to dip that feather in the ink, self-irony would take over. I'd leave immediately. I'd find somewhere less lonesome, less pretentious, noisier, and a place full of obstacles. I feel very grateful to the audiences here, to the festivals here, people that protect the British film industry's core values. It's politics, it's decisions, but it's also individuals from the BFI, the BBC, Film 4, people who continue to make films that maintain your tradition of grandeur, but also films about shame, about hunger, about people who are hit by raining stones, about people who won't let each other go, or people who need to talk about Kevin. And I hope that BAFTA will continue to protect the British film industry and your film identity. And I'm thankful to the David Lean Foundation that I get to be here.